It is 98 days till the man burns, and today we're talking about dust. How can you minimize it getting inside everything you bring with you, or at least your sleeping areas? I see the question pop up and people are generally kind of negative about it and like, oh, if you can't handle a bit of dust, you shouldn't be going to Burning Man. But I don't think there's anything wrong with attempting to not get your sleeping area full of dust. Like, realistically, it's gonna get dust in it. But that doesn't mean that it needs to be like inches and inches of dust to the point where it's just terrible and you can't sleep there. So it doesn't really matter what you're in, you know, an RV, a hexayurt, a tent, like whatever you are sleeping in, chances are dust is still going to end up in it, but obviously some are a bit harder than others. You know, a tent, if you haven't demeshed it and stuff, your tent is going to be much harder to keep dust out of. So the first thing you want to do is implement a no shoes rule. Most of the dust that gets inside is tracked in on people's shoes. And you know, if you're in a tent, you really don't need to be wearing your shoes when you go in the tent. So just take them off, leave them outside the door, maybe stuff your socks in the top and put them upside down so that the dust doesn't collect inside your shoes while you're not wearing them. But that straight away, just not wearing your shoes inside and tracking that dust in is going to help minimize the amount of dust that is getting inside. And it's a good idea to have a little brush off before you enter as well, especially if you're wearing something like a toga or a tutu, like some loose clothing that has folds where there's lots of opportunity for dust to collect in the folds of those clothes or in the fabric somehow. You know, if you're wearing like a leather catsuit, you're probably not going to collect that much dust on it. But you know, a toga, there's lots of folds that the dust can get in. So just have a little brush off, a shake off, get all that excess off. If you are going to be sleeping in a tent and your tent has mesh and holes and things like that, then you will want to try and get those covered up. If you look around on forums like ePlayer, you'll find there's quite a few threads that talk about demeshing tents. If you're getting a new tent for Burning Man, you know, you could try and look for one that has the least amount of mesh or holes on it, and you know, that's going to be a nice start. It's less work for you. But one thing to bear in mind, if you are planning to put fabric or something over the mesh and you stitch it on, if the tent was waterproof, by stitching it, you're piercing holes in that waterproof layer, so your tent will no longer be waterproof. I think that you can get something that you can put over the stitch holes that then re-waterproofs it, but you know, just a heads up, you don't want to, you know, use that tent that you have de-waterproofed somewhere else where it's going to rain. Otherwise you're going to have a sad time. Some people create covers that go over the top of their tent so it like covers all of the mesh area without needing to stitch it on. Some people use tape on both sides of the mesh, but it's not really a foolproof method with the tape because sometimes the tape will come off, it will lose its stickiness, sometimes it's going to leave a residue on your tent that's very hard to get off. Like I say, there's many methods of doing it. I'm probably getting a new tent this year, hooray! So if I do, then I will try and do a video on what I do to demesh my tent. If you're coming in an RV, then you know, it's a similar process. You don't have mesh, but you have lots of seams and gaps on the RV where dust is going to be able to get in, have, you know, vents and things. So you're going to want to cover those up so the dust can't just like blow straight into your RV. Most people use painter's tape, but make sure you get the painter's tape that's for exteriors. The one that is for interiors, it's just not strong enough to stay on. So the blue exterior tape, that's the one you're looking for. And I'd avoid using like duct tape or gaffer tape because the heat makes the sticky side of the tape like transfer onto the RV and it's very difficult to get off. And you know, cleaning an RV after Burning Man is enough of a nightmare without having to spend ages trying to get all the sticky stuff off of the outside. So another problem is when the dust gets like on your sleeping gear, and so then you know, you're sleeping on a pillow full of dust, like everything's just dusty and it's a bit bleh. So what you can do to combat that is bag up all of that stuff when you are not using it. When you wake up, pop that in a big bin bag and then put a bin bag over the top, so you know you have the opening of the first bag going up and the opening of the second bag going down, and that's going to just create kind of a protective layer so that any dust that does get in through the day, it's not going to get on your sleeping stuff. I mean, eventually it will end up on your sleeping stuff because, you know, when you get it out, but it's just a way to help minimize how much dust is getting on your sleeping stuff. And aside from your sleeping gear, it can be good to do that with your clothes, especially, you know, socks, underwear, things like that, things that are in very close contact to delicate areas. You know, you don't want to be putting on underwear that are just full of player dust or socks full of player dust. So those are also a great thing to keep in Ziploc bags or double bag them or something. And you know, when you open those bags, just, you know, open it to grab something and close it. Don't like just leave it open for all that dust to get in. And that kind of goes for lots of stuff. You know, don't leave things outside your tent or leave them open where they're going to get covered in dust if they don't really need to be there. And the same with doors. You want to keep those closed when they don't need to be open. So with things like RVs and even tents, you might want to get a bit of airflow going on in there once in a while. So you just kind of have to pick your time well when there's, you know, the air is nice and still and calm, there's not lots of dust blowing around everywhere. Have it open and, you know, be prepared to close it. You definitely don't want to leave your like tent or RV open and go off somewhere for an hour, because chances are you'll come back and there'll just be a layer of dust. It's worth checking out the wind direction as well so that you can angle the door away from it. So like if the wind's blowing this way, you want your door facing that way. And then there's less chance that the dust is going to blow in there. It can be difficult because obviously wind direction can change. When you have a tent, it's much easier to control how many people are coming into your tent. Because, you know, tents are really small. It's not that often that you're like, hey, can I come and sit in your tent? But with an RV, it is a bit more challenging. There will be, you know, probably more people coming in and out of your RV. So, you know, make sure they're taking their shoes off. Maybe have a bucket by the door that people can put their shoes in. Get people to brush off, you know, make sure that people are shutting the door when they come in and out. Don't just leave it open for hours if there's wind and dust is blowing in and stuff. So, you know, if you're a big group in an RV or there's lots of people kind of coming in and out of your RV all the time, just make sure that everyone is following those kind of rules so it's not full of dust. You might be a bit more lucky with an RV because, you know, if dust does get in, you can sweep it up if you bring a broom with you or, you know, makeshift something to just sweep all the dust out. It's not going to get it all out, but, you know, you could get a lot of it out. But with a tent, obviously it's much more complicated if the dust gets in there to get it back out. So what you can do is obviously shake things out outside, you know, your bedding, things like that. If that's full of dust, go and give it a good shake outside. But really the dust on the floor, it's kind of there. You could bring a blanket or something that you could take outside and shake and put in the base of your tent, almost like a carpet, so that, you know, the dust layer is trapped underneath it and then it's not going to be quite as dramatic. Ultimately, dust will get in your tent. It will end up in your tent and you just kind of have to accept it and go with it. You can minimize it, but you're still going to end up with some in there. I don't think anyone's ever come back from Burning Man and been like, no, I didn't get any dust in my tent or RV. It's kind of part and parcel. If the reason you're worried about dust is because of breathing it, is, you know, if you have like allergies or asthma or something like that and the dust really kind of makes you suffer, then I would suggest bringing along some kind of mask that you can sleep in. You might not want to sleep in a full like face mask or, you know, even the half dust masks. So, you know, you could bring something along that's just going to offer you some protection from any dust that is in your living area. So I hope this was helpful, guys, and if any of the rest of you have any tips or tricks for minimizing the amount of dust getting in your sleeping area, then let us know in the comments below. And if you see me at Burning Man this year, feel free to come and say hi to me. Bye, guys.